They say you don't truly know someone until you break up with them. I used to think that was just something bitter people said to make themselves feel better. I don't anymore. We'll call her Jess. We dated for about 6 months in college. She was beautiful in a porcelain doll kind of way. Soft voice, wide eyes, always seeming a little off. I chalked it up to social anxiety or maybe shyness. I liked that she seemed to need me. At first, things were great. She was thoughtful, maybe too thoughtful. She'd remember things I didn't even know I'd told her. My childhood dog's birthday, the exact date I'd lost my first tooth. She gave me a hand-drawn picture of my house from Google Maps, a week after I casually mentioned where I grew up. Flattering, I thought, at first, but the mood shifted fast. I noticed she didn't really have friends, just a phone full of text chains where she sent messages but rarely got responses. If I didn't text her back within 15 minutes, she'd send a selfie with a sad face, followed by a message like, "Do you still like me?" Or worse, "Are you with her?" There was no her. One night, after we had a minor disagreement, nothing serious, just me wanting a night to myself, she disappeared from her apartment. I got 13 missed calls and one text that just said, "It's carving now. Permanent. Like us." I rushed her place. The door was unlocked. Her bedroom was dark except for a flickering candle on a nightstand. And there, sitting cross-legged on her bed, was Jess, smiling, calm, and on her forearm, red, raw, fresh, our initials, J plus. She looked at me like she'd just given me a Christmas present. "Now it's forever," she whispered. I broke things off the next day. Cold, fast, and clear. I was terrified. I even changed my number. I told my co-workers not to tell anyone when I was working. I moved into a new apartment on the other side of the city. But that wasn't the end. The first sign she hadn't let go was the envelope. No stamp, just my name, left at the front desk of the office where I worked. Inside, a picture of us at a restaurant, taken from outside the window. My back was turned. Hers wasn't. She was staring straight into the camera. On the back, she'd written, "You looked so happy that night. You always do when you don't know I'm watching." I gave it to security. They shrugged. No real threat. Nothing they could do. Then she started showing up. At first, it was just shadows, someone watching from across the street, just barely visible when I'd step out for lunch. But one night, I stayed late working alone. Around 9:40 p.m., I went to the break room for coffee. The office was mostly empty by then, just me, the buzz of fluorescent lights, and the low hum of vending machines. That's when I saw it, pressed up against the glass door of the lobby. Jess. Her face was pale and expressionless, but her arms were bare, and beneath the cold blue office lights, I saw dozens of new scars, some healed, some still pink. Names, symbols, some I didn't recognize, but one stood out. My name, repeated 4 times, in a perfect square. I called building security. They got there in minutes. She was gone. No sign of her. The footage from that night? Corrupted. Just static. I took a few days off work. Stayed with a friend. Tried to move on. But Jess wasn't done. The final straw came a week later. I returned to my desk one morning and found something wrapped in black tissue paper sitting on my keyboard. No note. Just a small object about the size of a phone. I unwrapped it. It was a hand mirror. The kind you'd find on a vanity. Old. Ornate. And scratched into the glass, barely visible unless the light hit it just right, were the words, "I see you, even when you don't see me." I quit that job the same day. Moved states. New name. New everything. That was 3 years ago. Every now and then, I still feel like someone's watching. Not always. Just sometimes. I'll catch a glimpse of someone across the street staring too long. I'll find a strange hair tie on my doorknob, or an old mirror propped up in a thrift store window, and wonder if Jess ever stopped watching, or if she just got better at hiding. Because some people can't handle the idea of letting go. Some don't believe love ends. And some, like Jess, don't think it should. They just wait, watching, until the moment they can make it permanent. Again, and again, and again. They're watching from everywhere. Subscribe before it's too late. And tell me, where are you watching from? It started with a whisper, faint, garbled, almost like static carried by the wind. But I lived alone, and my windows were shut. Every night. Always. I just moved into a smart home community. Those sleek, modern developments wired to the teeth with automation. Lights on voice command. Security locks you could open with your fingerprint. A thermostat that learned your habits. And I loved it. Until I didn't. The first night it happened, I was brushing my teeth when I heard it. A voice. Low. Male. Distorted through the bathroom speaker. It said my name. Not shouted, just whispered. As if testing. I spat out the toothpaste, yanked open the settings, and checked the home audio system. Nothing was playing. No intercom call. No paired device. I convinced myself it was some glitch. Maybe interference from a neighbor's system. Tech hiccups happen. That's what I told myself. Until it said something else. The second time, it wasn't just my name. It said, "You look tired tonight." I froze, because I had just looked into the mirror. That exact thought had crossed my mind. It didn't feel like a glitch anymore. It felt like someone was watching. I shut down the entire system, turned off Wi-Fi, disconnected the smart hub. Silence. For a while. But when the lights turned back on by themselves at 3:12 a.m., I knew I wasn't just imagining things. There's something deeply unsettling about silence being broken by a familiar voice, especially when that voice shouldn't be there. It was my ex, Nolan. We dated for 2 years. Tech guy, quiet, charismatic in that introverted genius kind of way. He used to build little gadgets for fun. Once, he made a doorbell that played personalized messages depending on who rang it. I ended it after I caught him monitoring my location without telling me. He claimed it was for safety. I knew it was control. I moved, changed my number, blocked every account. But the house was my mistake, because Nolan had helped me choose it back when we were still together. He knew the brand of smart systems it used. He knew the architecture, and apparently, he knew how to get in. I started hearing things when I was alone. Laughter in the vents. My favorite songs playing through the kitchen speaker at random hours. Always just a little too loud, just a little distorted. He knew I wouldn't report it, because who would believe it wasn't just a bug, just a tech malfunction, until he escalated. One morning, I woke up to the smell of burnt toast. The toaster, scheduled to be off, had been activated. There were crumbs, but I hadn't used it in days. Then came the lights. They pulsed red, not flickered, pulsed like a heartbeat, syncing perfectly to my breathing. And then, the walls started talking. The intercom system clicked on. I didn't even know it could do that without a prompt. Miss me, his voice. Smooth, cold, deliberate, not yelling, not taunting, calm, like a bedtime story. He continued, "Do you feel safer without me?" A pause. I don't. I ran to the panel, tried to shut it down again. No response. The system was locked. Password changed. He was inside it. Not physically, but in the code. Like a parasite, he'd embedded himself in the house's nervous system. He was watching me through the smart cameras, listening through the mics, controlling every connected device. I unplugged everything I could, ripped cords out of the wall, shattered the tablet that controlled the house. But he'd anticipated that. A message lit up on the thermostat screen. You can't run from a house that listens. I started sleeping in my car. I couldn't sell the house, not without figuring out how he'd accessed it. I contacted the manufacturer. They investigated, said there were no signs of hacking, no breach, no anomalies. They blamed it on stress. But Nolan never used traditional backdoors. He was the kind of person who left no fingerprints. Then, the final straw. One morning, I checked the oven because it had turned on by itself again. Inside was a printed photo. Me, sleeping, taken from above. And on the back, scribbled in what looked like red marker. Still tired, that was it. I left the house. Permanently. Filed a restraining order, even though there was no tangible evidence. Nolan was never formally charged. He vanished from every platform after that. I live in a small walk-up now. No Wi-Fi. No smart devices. Just analog locks and blackout curtains. And sometimes, when it's late, and the wind moves the curtains just right, I still think I hear his voice, like static, whispering through the walls. It started with a knock. Not loud, not frantic, just persistent. 3 taps. A pause. 3 more. I didn't answer. I never answer. Not unless I'm expecting someone, and I wasn't. I waited by the door, holding my breath, listening for footsteps fading down the hallway. But whoever was just stood there, waiting. I glanced through the peephole. No one. Just the empty corridor of my 3rd-floor apartment building. Weird. I chalked it up to some neighbor's friend hitting the wrong door. Happens all the time. I turned back to my couch, unpaused my show, and tried to forget it. But something fell off. Because that knock, it sounded familiar. The next day, a moving truck pulled up to the building. I watched from my window as a few men hauled furniture up the steps. Nothing unusual. Until I saw her. Laura, my ex. My blood ran cold. We hadn't spoken in nearly a year. Our breakup hadn't been mutual. She didn't want it to end. And the weeks that followed had been unhinged. Endless texts. Anonymous calls. Letters on my windshield. She even left a broken picture frame on my porch with the words "Fix Us" scratched into the glass. I changed my number. Blocked everything. She disappeared after that. I thought maybe she'd finally moved on. But there she was, smiling, laughing with the movers, carrying a box with the same cracked photo frame I'd thrown away. I felt sick. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did and didn't care. Either way, I backed away from the window. My hands were shaking. Hours passed. I kept trying to convince myself it wasn't her, that I'd imagined it, that it was someone who looked like her. But when the hallway lights clicked on at dusk, I heard her laugh echo through the vents. It was her, no doubt. That night, I triple-locked my door. The first few days were quiet. I avoided the hall, didn't check the mail, left for work 10 minutes earlier to make sure we wouldn't cross paths. It didn't work. She knocked again. Same pattern. 3 slow taps. A pause. 3 more. This time, I opened the door. There she stood, Laura. Her eyes lit up like we were old friends reuniting. She was holding a plate of cookies, like some sitcom neighbor. I figured I'd be neighborly, she said. Isn't this crazy? My mouth was dry. How did you know I lived here? She tilted her head, like it was a silly question. I didn't. A pause. Until I did. I didn't take the cookies. I closed the door slowly, gently, without saying a word. And I locked it. Then I pushed a chair against the knob and sat in silence for an hour, staring at the door, waiting to hear her leave. She didn't. Not for a while. Eventually, I peeked through the peephole again. She was still there, not knocking, not talking, just standing, smiling. Things escalated fast after that. I started hearing footsteps pacing above me. But Laura lived next door, not upstairs. Still, they came every night, slow, deliberate footsteps that moved from one end of the ceiling to the other. Then came the tapping, from inside the vents. Soft at first, then rhythmic, like Morse code. I taped over every vent, stuffed towels under the doors. But it didn't matter. The tapping found a way back in. One night, I woke up to music, faint, muffled, like an old lullaby playing on repeat. I pressed my ear to the wall that divided our apartments. That's when I heard her voice, whispering, "Come back." I reported it to the landlord, told him I was being harassed, that she was unstable. He nodded sympathetically, said he'd look into it. Then, he gave me a copy of her application. She'd used a fake name. Same birth date, same ID number, different name. She'd lied, changed her identity, just to move in next to me. That's when I packed a bag, slept in my car that night. I didn't trust her not to come through the walls. But when I returned the next morning, everything had changed. The hallway was silent. Her door was ajar. I shouldn't have gone in, but I did. Her apartment was pristine. Too pristine, like a model unit. Empty coffee cups lined up perfectly on the counter. No dishes, no clothes, just photos everywhere. Photos of me, sleeping, eating, driving. In one, I'm brushing my teeth. In another, I'm crying on the night of our breakup. But the last photo made my stomach twist. It was me standing in her doorway, right where I was now, only the angle. It was taken from inside my own apartment. I sprinted back to mine, tore it apart, looking for cameras, wires, anything. And I found it. Inside the air vent. A small lens, blinking red. A hidden camera. I called the police. Filed a report. They came. Took statements. She wasn't home. But when they opened her closet, they found a hole. Cut clean through the drywall. Leading into my bedroom. She'd carved a tunnel. Watched me for weeks. Maybe longer. They never found her. The apartment sits empty now. Her door sealed. Her belongings gone. But some nights I still hear it. The knock. 3 taps. A pause. 3 more. And the faint sound of a woman whispering. I'm still your neighbor. This story isn't over yet. Hit subscribe to follow the shadows. It had been nearly 2 years since I'd last seen Jonah. We hadn't ended on good terms. To be honest, it wasn't a breakup. It was an unraveling. Slow, ugly, and tangled with manipulation. He wasn't violent, but he was intense in ways that left a mark. Possessive, always watching. And when it ended, he didn't scream or beg. He just stared at me for a long time and said, "This story isn't over." I thought that was just a line, something pathetic people say when they lose control. But when I opened that cream-colored envelope last spring, I knew he meant it literally. Inside was a wedding invitation. Thick, expensive paper, embossed lettering, silver thread. And on the RSVP line, I read the names, Jonah Whitman and Rebecca Gray. My name. There was no address, just a date, June 13th, and a time, 3 p.m. That night, I called every mutual friend we had left, only to realize he hadn't spoken to most of them in over a year. He'd vanished from social media. His number was disconnected. I even called his sister. She hadn't heard from him in months. According to her, he'd left town. I might have let it go, chalked it up to some twisted joke, except for one thing. A second envelope arrived a week later. This one was thinner. Inside was a photo of a wedding dress on me. Not a picture I remembered taking. Not one I'd ever posed for. But there I was, expression blank, eyes glazed, standing in front of a white veil. The background was unfamiliar, like a set or a mock-up chapel. Something staged. This wasn't just obsession. This was performance. Over the next few weeks, the invitations kept coming, each one more elaborate. A dinner menu with my favorite foods. A seating chart that included people I hadn't spoken to in years. A bridal registry printed with items I never picked, but somehow matched my taste exactly. I started to feel followed. One afternoon, I stopped at a florist near my job. The cashier smiled when I walked in. She said, "You're early. Your fiancé just left. He said you'd be coming in to pick up the centerpiece samples." I asked her what he looked like. She said, "Tall, neat beard, dark eyes, charming." Jonah. He had been there, minutes before me, and he'd told her I'd be coming. I started locking everything. Got a cheap door camera. Started sleeping with the lights on. I even filed a police report, but they couldn't do anything without a direct threat. To them, it was a prank, maybe harassment, but not a crime. Not yet. Until the night, I came home to find my apartment door ajar. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was broken. But something had changed. My mirror had been replaced. Not just removed and switched, replaced. The new one was bigger, older, vintage, and carved into the bottom corner of the frame was our initials. JW plus RG. It was the exact mirror from our old shared apartment. The one we'd sold before the breakup. He tracked it down, or he never sold it to begin with. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the door with a knife and called a locksmith the next morning. Then came the final invitation. Black envelope, handwritten in silver ink. Inside was a single line. Rehearsal dinner for the bride who forgot she said yes. There was a location this time. A house I didn't recognize. About an hour away. I shouldn't have gone, but I needed proof. Something real. Something I could take to the police. When I arrived, the house looked empty, but the front door creaked open on its own. Inside, it was immaculate. Candles, music, a faint smell of lavender and dust. Every photo on the wall featured us. My face, planted on someone else's memories. He'd taken images from our past and edited them. Added me to scenes I'd never lived. Beaches I'd never walked. Dinners I'd never eaten. In the living room was a long dining table. Set for two. At the end of it, a mannequin sat in a wedding gown. My size. I was about to leave when I heard the music stop. Footsteps upstairs. Slow. Deliberate. I didn't wait to see him. I ran. Drove all the way to the nearest police station. Filed everything. Photos, letters, the invitation with the address. When officers went back to the house, it was empty. No mannequin. No photos. No furniture. Just dust and silence. The realtor said it had been vacant for 3 years. But the table was still there. And on it they found something. A ring box. Inside was a note that read, "She's not ready now, but she will be. Love waits." That was 5 months ago. I moved since then. Changed jobs. Changed numbers. But every year on June 13th, I find something new in the mail. An RSVP card. A venue. A new date. This year's invitation came with something else. A key. And underneath it, a note. This time, you pick the chapel. It started with small things I didn't even think twice about at first. After our breakup, I thought I was finally free. But freedom, I learned, was just an illusion. I had started going to the gym to clear my mind, to rebuild myself without him. The weight of the past was heavy, and sweat was the only thing I thought could wash it away. But soon, the shadows of my past started creeping in again, in the most unexpected place. About 2 weeks after we ended things, I noticed someone familiar at the gym. Someone who looked almost like him, but with a different hairstyle, maybe a pair of glasses, and a fake beard that barely covered his sharp jawline. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe it was a coincidence. After all, gyms aren't small places. People come and go, strangers mingle, and I didn't want to let paranoia ruin my routine. But then, every time I looked up, he was there, at the treadmill next to me, or the weight rack I usually used. His eyes were the same, cold, calculating, and unsettlingly familiar. I remember one day, wiping the sweat from my brow after a particularly brutal workout, I caught him staring. Not just glancing, staring. His gaze bore into me with a twisted mix of obsession and something darker. I wanted to scream, but my voice caught in my throat. I felt trapped. I thought about telling the gym staff, but what proof did I have? A beard and glasses? People change their look all the time. Besides, would anyone believe I was being stalked by my ex? Then the subtle harassment began. Small notes slipped into my locker. Cryptic messages like, "I'm closer than you think, and you can't escape me." They weren't signed, but the handwriting was familiar, disturbingly so. My heart raced every time I found one. Who else could know my locker code but someone who had been inside my life before? One afternoon, I noticed my water bottle had been tampered with. The cap was loose, and the smell was off, like something metallic, sharp. I threw it away immediately. That's when I realized how dangerous this had become. This wasn't just a creepy coincidence. This was calculated. I stopped going at my usual times, hoping to avoid him. I switched my routine, used different equipment, always looking over my shoulder. But no matter what I did, he was there, always watching, always lurking. One night, on my way out, I caught a glimpse of him leaving the gym alone. But as I stepped into the parking lot, I saw his car parked just a few spaces away. It was unmistakably his, same make and model, same dent on the side. Panic surged through me. I fumbled with my keys, barely able to unlock my door. The next morning, I reported everything to the police. They took my statement, but warned me stalking cases were hard to prove without concrete evidence. Determined not to be a victim, I installed cameras in my apartment and asked friends to accompany me whenever I went out. But the fear never left. It was always there, lurking in the back of my mind, like a dark cloud waiting to burst. Weeks later, the gym announced they were doing a membership ID check. When the staff asked to see my ex's ID, he handed over a fake card. That's when they finally realized something was off. Security reviewed footage and found him sneaking around restricted areas, locker rooms, staff offices. They confronted him, but by then, he had vanished without a trace. The police found his disguise, a box of wigs, fake beards, and prescription glasses, in an abandoned locker. It was like a twisted costume kit for a stalker playing a dangerous game. Even now, months later, I wonder how close I came to losing myself. How easily he slipped into my world again, disguised not just by a fake beard, but by his obsession and refusal to let go. The gym was supposed to be my sanctuary, a place to heal and move forward. Instead, it became a haunting ground where the past chased me down, cloaked in lies and disguise. I never found out why he did it. Maybe it was to scare me, to remind me he was still in control. Or maybe it was his own twisted way of trying to keep me close. But one thing I know for sure, sometimes the scariest monsters don't lurk in the dark woods. They hide in plain sight, wearing masks and smiling right beside you. You never think the love you leave behind will come back in a way that chills you to the bone. But sometimes, what seems like a desperate act of longing hides as something far darker, something that will haunt your every step. This story starts when I ended things with my ex, Sarah. We'd been together for almost 3 years, but it wasn't a healthy relationship. She was possessive, the kind of person who controlled who I talked to, what I wore, and even how I spent my weekends. It was suffocating. I finally gathered the courage to break free. I thought leaving would be the end of it, that I could finally breathe again. But Sarah didn't see it that way. She made it clear she wasn't going to let go without a fight. What followed was subtle at first. Strange texts, unanswered calls, and then the threats. Not violent, not yet, but the kind of messages that send a chill down your spine because you know someone's watching. Someone who's obsessed. Then came the night that changed everything. I came home from work to find my door unlocked. At first, I thought maybe I'd forgotten to lock it. But the feeling that something was off hit me hard when I stepped inside. My living room was a mess. Pillows shredded, furniture scratched. And my dog, Max, was gone. Max wasn't just a pet. He was my shadow, my constant companion, the one thing that kept me grounded through all the chaos. I panicked, called his name, looked everywhere. That's when I found the note, taped to the fridge in my own handwriting. Except I hadn't written it. It read, "If you want to see Max again, come find me. You left me alone. Now I'm alone too. I tried calling Sarah, but her phone was off. My heart sank. This wasn't just about a stolen dog. This was a message. Days passed. I contacted the police, posted flyers, and searched everywhere. Nothing. Then, out of nowhere, a text from an unknown number. He's safe. For now. If you want him back, meet me where it all began. That place was the park where Sarah and I first met, a quiet spot by the river. I went there at dusk, heart pounding. The shadows grew longer as I walked along the path. Then I heard a soft bark. Max was there, tied to a bench, wagging his tail, but clearly stressed. Behind him stood Sarah. She looked calm, but her eyes told a different story. A mixture of pain, anger, and something dangerously unhinged. I asked why she'd done it. She said, "You left me. You took everything. Max was the only way to bring you back." But there was more beneath her words. I realized this wasn't just about love or heartbreak. This was about control, about making sure I couldn't escape her grip. I wanted to believe Sarah could get help, that this was just a cry for attention. But something inside me knew this wasn't over. Even now, whenever I hear a soft bark or see a shadow move just out of the corner of my eye, I wonder if she's still watching, waiting, because some scars don't heal, and some bonds are twisted beyond repair. It started with small things that didn't seem all that strange at first. A misplaced mug here, a turned picture frame there. But then it got worse. She was my ex. We hadn't spoken since the breakup months ago. I thought I was finally free, but she wasn't ready to let go. One night, after a late shift at work, I came home to find my living room completely different. The couch was shifted 3 feet to the left. The coffee table had been flipped around. Even the lampshades were tilted at odd angles. I stared, frozen. Someone had been inside my apartment, without my permission. My heart pounded, but I told myself it must be a mistake. Maybe a friend dropped by, but no one else had my keys. Then the calls began, silent at first, then breathing. Heavy, ragged breaths on the other end. No words, just the sound of someone watching me through the phone line. I changed my locks. I installed new alarms. I even stayed at a friend's place for a few nights. But the feeling never left. One morning, I woke up to find the bedroom furniture rearranged. The bed was pushed against the opposite wall, and my clothes were folded neatly on the chair. She had been inside. The police took my report, but without evidence, there was little they could do. No signs of forced entry. No fingerprints. Just a lingering sense of invasion. Weeks later, I found a single post-it note stuck under my door. Written in her familiar, looping handwriting was just one word. Home. The word echoed in my mind. She was claiming it. My sanctuary was hers now. I started noticing subtle changes in my daily routine. Doors I was certain I locked were sometimes left unlocked. Lights turned on and off. Items I was sure I'd placed in one spot appeared somewhere else. She wasn't just breaking in. She was rewriting my space, shaping it in her image. One night, I stayed up, determined to catch her. I hid in the dark corners of my living room, clutching a flashlight. At 2:17 a.m., I heard the soft click of the door unlocking. She slipped inside like a shadow. Her eyes were wide, almost wild, but there was a strange calm in her movements. She walked slowly, tracing her fingers over the furniture, as if memorizing every edge and texture. Then she began to move things, lifting cushions, pushing tables, adjusting curtains. I wanted to scream, to run, to call the police. But I stayed frozen, watching her disturb the life I was trying to rebuild. She paused by the window and whispered this was ours. It wasn't just furniture. It was a message. A haunting reminder that the past wasn't over. The next morning, I found a new note on the coffee table. Make it right. But how do you make something right when the other person is already living inside your walls? without you even knowing. Days later, a neighbor told me they saw a woman matching her description walking around the building, carrying a small box filled with items from my apartment. She was taking pieces of my life, bit by bit. I installed cameras. For a week, they recorded nothing but empty hallways. Then, one night, I watched footage of her entering my apartment. But it wasn't the woman I remembered. It was a ghostly figure, blurred and distorted, moving through my living room with an unnatural sway. I felt chills crawl down my spine. The next day, the police finally took the evidence seriously. But before they could act, she vanished. No calls, no notes, just silence. But the rearranged furniture remained. Every time I walked into my apartment, I felt her presence, like she was watching, waiting. I never saw her again, but the changes she made lingered. The couch stayed shifted, the lampshades forever tilted. And sometimes, late at night, I hear the faint sound of footsteps moving softly through my empty rooms, echoes of a past I can't escape. It started as a sweet gesture. After our breakup, I thought he genuinely wanted to make amends. So when he sent me a small box, wrapped neatly with a ribbon, I didn't hesitate to open it. Inside was a delicate silver necklace, with a tiny pendant shaped like a compass. It was beautiful, sentimental even. A symbol, he said, of finding my way, maybe finding myself again. I wore it almost every day. At first, it felt comforting, like a piece of him was still with me, even though we weren't. But that comfort soon turned into something else, something much darker. It began with strange coincidences. I would leave my apartment late at night, and somehow he would show up unexpectedly, just blocks away. Sometimes at places I didn't even mention visiting. At first, I brushed it off as bad luck or chance. But it wasn't chance. One evening, as I sat alone in my living room, scrolling through social media, my phone buzzed with a notification I didn't recognize. It was a location ping, a message showing my exact whereabouts. The timestamp was from minutes ago. I froze. How did he know where I was? My mind raced back to the necklace. The compass pendant. It never left my neck. Could it be more than just jewelry? That night, my sleep was shattered by a soft chime. A text. No words, just a map pin, right outside my apartment. The necklace felt cold against my skin. I started noticing subtle changes in my surroundings. Shadows just beyond the corner of my vision. A car idling too long near my usual routes. Footsteps echoing when I was alone. I stopped wearing the necklace. But it was gone when I woke up the next day. Gone. I knew he took it back, but why? I was afraid to tell anyone. What would they think? That I was paranoid? That this was some kind of obsession? But deep down, I knew something was terribly wrong. A week later, I got a call. No one spoke. Just silence on the other end. Then, another message. A photo. My apartment building, but from an angle only someone very close could get. The timestamp was recent. He was watching me. Still, I started changing my routines, taking different routes, staying with friends. But the feeling of being hunted lingered, and it grew heavier each day. I confronted him once, during a chance encounter in a coffee shop. He smiled, calm and unbothered, and said, "You're never really alone. Not with this." He tapped his pocket, implying the necklace, or something like it, was still in play. I wanted to believe he was bluffing. But the next day, I found a note slipped under my door. It read, "I know where you are. I always have." I realized then that the necklace wasn't just a gift. It was a trap, a twisted way to tether me, to control me, long after he was out of my life. Every time I thought I'd lost him, he was there, in the shadows, tracking me through a device hidden in that pendant. The compass never pointed north. It pointed straight to me. It started with a text. A simple message that shattered my world into 1,000 jagged pieces. I'm sorry. Goodbye. No warning. No explanation. Just those 3 words, sent at 3:17 a.m. I tried calling her. No answer. I called again and again, but only silence greeted me. The next morning, the police were at my door. They told me she was gone. A car accident, the kind you read about but never expect to face. A hit and run, they said. Her body was found by the side of the highway, mangled and unrecognizable. Identification was made through dental records. I wanted to believe it was a nightmare, but the evidence was overwhelming. Except, something didn't add up. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, like shadows were shifting just beyond my sight. My phone started acting strangely. Glitches, weird noises, distorted voices when I answer calls. Then, the letters began. Handwritten notes slipped under my door, each one more cryptic and threatening than the last. You killed her. You'll pay for what you did. I had no idea what they meant. We had our problems, like any couple, but I never wished her harm. We had argued before, yes, but never anything that should have ended like this. Days passed, and the police questioned me relentlessly. The community whispered behind my back. My friends pulled away, unsure whether to believe me or the mounting suspicion. Then the emails arrived. Anonymous accounts sent messages with screenshots of our text conversations, edited to look like threats, abuse, manipulation. The evidence was damning. I was becoming the villain in a story I barely understood. Late one night, I received a video file. Hesitant, I played it. The grainy footage showed a woman who looked just like her. She was smiling, alive, and speaking directly to the camera. "I'm free now," she said softly. "I had to disappear. I'm sorry for the pain, but he's the reason I had to do this." The screen went black, and the message was clear. She had faked her death, and I was the one she blamed. At first, I thought it was a cruel prank, but the more I searched, the more I found subtle clues she had left behind. A burner phone hidden in her old apartment, bank accounts with untraceable transactions, and a trail of fake identities created over years. It was a meticulously planned escape, one that used my guilt as a weapon. Why would she do this? Was it revenge, fear, or something far darker? She had told me once, in the quiet moments between fights, that she felt trapped, that our relationship was a cage she couldn't break free from. But I never imagined she would go to such lengths to erase her life, and to erase me in the process. The police dismissed the video as fake, and without her body, the case was cold. But I knew the truth. She was out there, somewhere, watching, and the messages never stopped. One night, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing. A message appeared. "Look outside." Heart pounding, I peered through the window. Across the street, standing in the shadows, was a figure, unmistakably her silhouette. But when I blinked, she was gone. Only a single rose lay on my doorstep. Attached was a note. "You can't hide from me." Since then, my life has been a waking nightmare. Every stranger's glance feels like a threat. Every unexpected noise sends me spiraling into fear. She turned the story upside down. Victim and predator swapped roles in her twisted narrative. And in the silence left behind, I'm haunted by the question, who is the real monster here? It started off as a small inconvenience, one of those things you don't really think about. I was living my life, trying to move on from my ex, someone who had been more obsessive than loving. I thought the worst was behind me. But then the notes began. The first time, I was pushing my grocery cart down the aisle, distracted by the endless shelves, trying to check off my list. I glanced down, and there it was, a folded piece of paper slipped under the handle. I barely noticed it at first, thinking it was just a forgotten coupon or maybe a misplaced store flyer. But when I unfolded it, my heart dropped. The note read, simply, I see you. I froze. The handwriting was unmistakable. His handwriting. At first, I thought maybe I had imagined it. Maybe someone else had slipped it in as a prank. But the unsettling feeling clung to me like a shadow. The next week, it happened again. This time, the note was more detailed. I know where you go every Thursday. No signature, no explanation, just those words. I stopped going to the same store at the same time. I changed my routine, trying to be unpredictable. But the notes kept coming. Each one arrived in my grocery cart, folded so carefully, written in that same cold, familiar scrawl. Did you hear that knock? That was me. Your favorite cereal is on aisle 5, but it won't be there much longer. I'm closer than you think. With every note, the dread in my chest grew heavier. The store, once a place of routine errands, twisted into a labyrinth of fear. I avoided the aisles where I usually shopped. I watched over my shoulder constantly. The cashier started to look concerned, as if they sensed the tension radiating from me. One evening, after a long day, I decided to confront the situation head-on. I went to the store with my phone ready, hoping to catch whoever was doing this. I rolled my cart slowly, eyes darting between shoppers, looking for any sign of a familiar face. Then I saw him, standing near the dairy section, casually browsing the milk cartons. It was him, the man I thought I'd escaped. Our eyes met, and his lips curled into a twisted smile. Without a word, he turned and vanished into the crowd. I called the police, of course, but without proof, without catching him in the act, they could only warn me to stay alert and consider a restraining order. The notes didn't stop. One morning, I found a note written in red ink, soaked through like it had been written in a rush. It said, "Last chance, come back to me." That night, I barely slept. The silence in my apartment felt thick, suffocating. Then, at 3 a.m., I heard a soft tapping on my window. Heart pounding, I dared to look. Nothing but the empty street. But taped to the outside glass was a small envelope. Inside was a photo of me, taken from behind as I walked home days before. On the back, a message, "I'm always watching." I moved after that. I moved across town, changed my phone number, and started locking every door and window with multiple deadbolts. But still, every week, the grocery notes found their way to me. Only now, they weren't in a cart anymore. They started showing up inside my mailbox, slipped under my door, even left on my car windshield. Each note grew darker, more desperate. "You can't hide. I'm the shadow in your light. We belong together. Forever." I realized then this wasn't about love. It was about control, about fear, about a twisted game he was playing with me as the only player. The most terrifying part, even when I tried to ignore them, tried to pretend they were just empty threats, the notes always hit their mark, always arrived exactly when I least expected them, ripping through any sense of safety I had left. It wasn't just a stalker's obsession. It was a calculated psychological assault. And no matter how many times I told myself I was safe, that was just paper, just words, each note left me feeling smaller, more trapped. Because sometimes the scariest monsters don't lurk in the shadows or behind locked doors. They hide in the most mundane places, like a grocery cart. It started as a faint flicker on my phone, a friend request from someone I didn't recognize. The profile picture was blurry, a shadowy face, and the name was strange, Luna Shadows. At first, I ignored it. But then a message appeared. "Hey, I think we have some mutual friends." Curious, but cautious, I glanced at the account. Only a few followers, almost no posts. Something about it felt off. I didn't respond. The next day, a new account appeared. This one named Jade Marrow. Same vague profile, same style of message. "Hey, I think we know each other from somewhere." That's when it hit me. These accounts were all sending the same message, different names, different faces, but the same tone, like a broken record stuck on repeat. Why would someone do this? A sinking feeling grew in my chest. I dug deeper and soon realized the terrifying truth. All these accounts were fake. Dozens of them, created meticulously, some with profile pictures stolen from strangers, others digitally altered. Each account was designed to get close to me again. It was her, my ex, the one who couldn't accept the breakup, the one who vanished from my life without a word, leaving behind only a trail of silence and unease. She wasn't done. At first, I thought maybe she was lonely, trying to reach out in a twisted way. But as the days passed, the messages grew more specific, more personal. One account mentioned a memory only she and I shared. The night we got caught in that thunderstorm, the way I laughed when I slipped in the mud. It was like she was watching me, reading every post, every comment, every detail of my life. I blocked one account, then another. But for every one I erased, two more appeared. Their messages grew more desperate, more insistent. Please talk to me. I miss us. You don't know what I'm going through. I felt trapped, hunted by shadows that could slip into my life without warning, without face or form. One night, I logged into my email and found a message from an account called Echo. The subject line was simple. Remember when you said you'd never leave me? I hesitated before opening it. The message was short but chilling. I never left. I'm always here. A shiver ran down my spine. How could she know? How was she so close, even when I thought I was safe? The digital presence became physical. I started noticing strange things around my apartment. Small changes I couldn't explain. My favorite coffee mug moved slightly from where I left it. A photo of us disappeared from the shelf. My curtains, which I was sure were closed before I went to bed, were partially open in the morning. I told myself it was paranoia, that maybe I was just tired. But the fake accounts didn't stop. One evening, an account named Raven sent me a link, a video. I was hesitant, but clicked it anyway. It was footage from my own living room, recorded just hours ago. I stared at the screen, frozen. The camera showed my empty room, but I could hear footsteps, soft, deliberate. Then a shadow crossed the frame. She was inside my apartment. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, there was no sign of forced entry. No evidence. Just the feeling that someone had been watching me, stalking me, crossing the boundary between the digital world and my reality. Days passed. The accounts kept appearing, sending messages, watching. One account sent me a puzzle, a riddle written in code, leading to a website I didn't recognize. I hesitated, but clicked the link. The page was a collage of pictures, photos of me, screenshots from my social media, and then at the center, a photo of her. Her eyes were hollow, her smile cold. Underneath, a message. I'm closer than you think. I'm in your world, your home, your mind. You can't hide. The line between the real and the virtual blurred. My phone buzzed constantly, but whenever I answered, the line was silent except for a faint whisper. Come back. Sleep became impossible. I felt her presence in the shadows of my room, in the flicker of the screen, in every notification. One night, my phone lit up with a new message from Luna Shadows. This time, it wasn't a simple greeting. It was a confession. I never stopped loving you. And now, you belong to me. I realized then, it wasn't just a desperate attempt to reconnect. It was a game, a psychological trap designed to erode my sense of safety, my grip on reality. Her obsession wasn't just about me. It was about control. And the scariest part? I wasn't sure if I was the hunter or the hunted anymore. It started as a normal weekend. I had just broken up with him, my ex, and was finally feeling free again. I locked the doors, double-checked the windows, and told myself this was a fresh start. But the nightmare was already creeping closer than I ever imagined. I live in an older house with creaky floors and a small attic space I rarely used. After the breakup, I didn't give the attic much thought. It was just a dusty storage spot filled with forgotten boxes and old memories. Until one day, I noticed something was off. At first, it was small things, my belongings slightly out of place, a door I always kept shut left slightly ajar. I told myself I was just being paranoid, leftover anxiety from the breakup. But then the sound started. Soft footsteps above my ceiling, like someone pacing back and forth. At night, the creaks grew louder, accompanied by faint whispers I could never quite make out. I blamed the house settling. Old houses do that, right? One evening, I decided to check the attic. The stairs groaned beneath my weight as I climbed, flashlight in hand. The air was thick with dust and the smell of mildew, but something else lingered, something sharp and unnatural. That's when I saw it. Fresh footprints in the dust, and the faint glow of a small fire from an old camping lantern. Someone had been there very recently. Panic set in. I called the police, but by the time they searched the attic, no one was there. No signs of forced entry downstairs. It was as if whoever was up there had vanished into thin air. Weeks passed. I replaced locks and installed cameras. Yet, every night, the sounds returned, scraping, pacing, sometimes the soft thud of a heavy breath. And the cameras? They caught nothing but static, and sometimes, just before the footage cut out, a shadow flickered in the corner. The worst part was realizing he had been there, my ex. Not just stalking me, but hiding in my attic. For 6 days, while I was at work, he had lived in that cramped space above me, sleeping in the dark, breathing my air, watching my every move through a tiny hole he drilled in the floorboards. It's the kind of horror that doesn't scream. It whispers. It waits in silence. And it breaks the boundary between your private world and his obsession. How did I not notice? The signs were there. The missing food from my kitchen, strange noises, unexplained footprints on the attic stairs. But I told myself it was just me losing my mind. He never wanted to hurt me physically. This wasn't about violence. It was about control, possession, and a terrifying form of invasion. Even now, the memory haunts me. The feeling that at any moment, he could be back, waiting in the shadows, hidden just out of sight. It started innocently enough. We broke up. Messy, but not unusual. You know the type. Too many texts unanswered, doors slammed, and that deafening silence that follows. But what I didn't expect was how she chose to tell our story afterward. She was always a writer, obsessed with horror novels and dark, twisted tales. After we split, I thought her writing would be her escape, but instead, it became something far more disturbing. A few months after we parted ways, I noticed a new book popping up everywhere, on shelves in online forums, even whispered about in indie circles. The title caught my eye, Twisted Shadows. Something about it felt familiar. I flipped through it out of curiosity. The pages were filled with eerie descriptions of a relationship falling apart, but exaggerated, warped, and soaked in dread. As I read, an unsettling feeling crept over me. The characters' names were different, but the details were ours. The arguments we had, the places we went, the private moments only we knew. She had rewritten our entire breakup, but as a horror story. A grotesque nightmare, painted in ink. But this wasn't just storytelling. She had turned our life into a chilling tale of obsession and terror. In her book, the ex-boyfriend wasn't just the victim of a breakup. He was a sinister figure, haunting her, stalking her every step. Every scene dripping with psychological terror. The kind that doesn't just frighten you, but twists your own memories into something you barely recognize. I reached out, hoping to understand why she did this. Her response was cold and cryptic. She said the story needed to be told from her perspective, that the horror wasn't just between us, but inside her mind. She said the book was a reflection of the darkness she felt after our separation. What chilled me most was how many people believed it. Strangers sympathizing with her pain, even fear. Some warned me to stay away, hinting I might be the villain in her tale. The lines between reality and fiction blurred faster than I could keep up. One night, months after the book's release, I started receiving emails. Anonymous, short, and unnervingly detailed. "You're not as safe as you think," one read. Another described the route I took home from work. The very route she'd written about in Twisted Shadows, where her character supposedly escaped a terrifying presence. Was this her? A fan? Or someone else entirely? The book had unleashed something, a ripple effect I never saw coming. I began to notice shadows lurking in my peripheral vision, strange noises in empty rooms. The fear wasn't just from the stories she'd written. It was from what she had awakened, a psychological trap woven into the fabric of my everyday life. When I tried to confront her again, she only smiled and said, "You're part of my story now. Forever. If you thought breakups were painful before, imagine living in a nightmare where your worst memories become a published horror story. A story that stalks you beyond the pages." Thanks for watching. Comment where you're from. I want to see how far the darkness has spread. Don't forget to subscribe for more horror.